Welcome to HVAC Full Blast, where you get industry inputs for real results. Today, we're diving into a topic that affects every professional, no matter where you are in your career: belief systems, self-confidence, and becoming the best version of yourself at work. Join Mary Carter from Trane and Stephen Ross from Sandler as they share their lessons learned and discuss how your mindset impacts your role. Let's get started.
Welcome back. I'm Mary Carter.
I'm Stephen Ross.
And we are back with some more discussions on what we're seeing out there, what is happening in the market, what's important, and really, something we want to talk about today, believing in yourself and how you get to being the best version of you out there when you're doing your role.
Yeah, I think, the pop psychology of the 90s was really kind of embodied in Chris Farley. So I grew up as a kind of Chris Farley fan. But there's some truth in there. I mean, he did a nice job of making fun of pop psychology. And some of that's just junk psychology entirely, but some of it there's some truth to. So let's talk about like that. What do you pull out of psychology, and how can that actually make you more money? I think that's, like the ROI on psychology, maybe.
Definitely. So, I mean, big expansive space, right? So drilling that down into, how we think about ourselves and what we do, what we say. I think, the first word that comes to, or maybe the first phrase that comes to mind is belief system, right? What's your belief system? What at your core, why do you do what you do every day? Why do you surround yourself with the people that you're with every day? Stephen, really curious on your thoughts on, just belief system in general.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting thinking about how everybody looks at the world. And we think sometimes even our best friends, like they look at the world the same way we do. And every now and then you're having a conversation with somebody and you realize, oh my gosh, like they're viewing things completely differently. And how did we get to the point where I am, and how did they get to the point where they are, where we're looking at the same thing, but we're describing things differently? And a lot of times that's what psychologists would call your family of origin. Like, where did you grow up? How did you grow up? What kind of stories did you learn growing up, about different topics? Like one of the frequent ones is, if you're in a room full of people and you say, hey, money doesn't grow on, everybody knows the answer to that, right?
Trees.
And so you say trees. Yeah. And so how many of you learned that as a little kid? And so what's the result of that? How do you treat money a little differently now that you're an adult, if that was one of the mantras that you learned growing up? So yeah, your belief systems have a huge impact. The what you started with and then what you have today, those have huge impacts on how successful are you going to be in various roles, for sure. How about growing up? Like, what are some of you said your dad was a sales guy growing up.
Yeah.
So maybe you had a pretty good belief system in terms of going into a sales career. Are there some things you learned from your dad that you're like, hey, I'm really glad I learned that from my dad?
Definitely. I mean, my dad was, or is, I should say, he still is this way. He's a clean person. Like, he really values like a place for everything and everything that's placed. Now, it might not necessarily be the place where somebody else wants it, but he knows where his things are. He was very organized. Anytime he was traveling, he knew how to be prepared and be on the road really at like the drop of a hat. And I always thought that was so interesting. Whether he was doing a call with a customer in his backyard or he had to get on a plane the next morning, he was ready. And the readiness of just being able to handle whatever's coming at you was something that I really was picking up on. It just watching him go through his career. And the other part of that too was he was so good at small talk. I mean, he could really just talk to anybody, get them to open up about something that was important to them and run with that topic. And I've heard someone say, how do you get better at small talk? Well, you just become a more interesting person. And it's true. I mean, my dad was so open to trying things and exploring foods and traveling. And I really picked up on, what seems like maybe just like a personal preference really paid off for him in his career because it made him interesting and relatable to lots of people who had different experiences. one thing about my dad's career too is he worked for a manufacturer that made their products overseas, and so he got to work a lot with international people very often, and that was also just like again like another notch in that intrigue of, now I need to be able to be relatable to another culture. And that was something to me that just left a big impression of like, wow, the world is not just my high school, right? Like the world has the potential to be bigger than this. And I think in what I brought from that into my career is just the openness to be able to try new things, go see new places, and not be afraid to just put myself out there. I think my friends call me like I'm like the queen of the 101 class. Sign me up for a 101. You might not catch me at 201, but I've tried a lot of things. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you? What have you seen, and what have you carried through that made you just sort of say, yeah, that's who I am?
Yeah, I think there's good things that come out of your belief system, and there's bad things. Some of the good ones growing up, my parents had a very large emphasis on helping people growing up, right? And kind of looking out for those less fortunate. And so I think that really carried through my adulthood as well. One of my first sales jobs I took a personality profile test, and it was right when I started. In fact, it was called a pre-employment personality profile, but they didn't give it to me till after they hired me.
Ooh,
And it was to kind of gauge the motivation for salespeople, like what motivates you. And the two things that they were looking for, one is they wanted very, very competitive salespeople. So, did you play sports in high school? I did that, but I didn't play in college. And, was I competitive? Sure. At like a high school athlete level, not a D1 or professional athlete level. Like I'm not ultra competitive. I certainly am not wired like Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant or somebody like that, And then two, they were like, well, how money motivated are you? Well, again, kind of growing up, my dad, highly educated, PhD, but didn't make a ton of money. And that wasn't a big emphasis in his career. And so, money motivation, that wasn't real high in me. And so what came back as the highest motivation for me really was helping people. And what's interesting is that company then turned around and fired me. They're like, oh, we screwed up. We shouldn't have hired you. You're not super competitive and you're not super money motivated. And that's what you need to be in sales. And so I went away as like, oh, maybe I'm not cut out for sales. But, my sales coach at Sandler later was like, hey, it's fine. You just got to think through when you go visit a customer, how does that impact that sales call? And so for me, I trained myself to walk in the door and sit down with a customer and think like, can I help these people? And if I don't close this sale, what happens to them? Well, a lot of times what happened to them is they went with another heating and air company that maybe didn't do as good a job as we would do, or they went with a product that was cheaper that really didn't address their needs. And then they're stuck with that for the next 10 or 15 years. And so I really started to view my job as a sales guy as helping people. And hey, if I can help somebody make a really good decision right now, it could save them some consequences down the road that they might have had if they made a bad decision. And so by reframing a sales call in my head as here's what I'm doing. I'm here to help these people. If I can't close the sale, I can't help them. Somebody else might help them just as good as I would, but I can't guarantee that. I know I'm going to help them. And so that's really what I kind of hung my hat on as a sales guy. Once I really kind of decided I need to get a lot better, was I needed to take it seriously, my role in helping people. So that was a belief system that, again, not super competitive, not super money motivated. But I'm very motivated to help people. So that I kind of had to feed on that a little bit.
I like those three tenets because I know for myself, not very competitive. I love being a fan. I was an Irish step dancer growing up. Okay, so pretty cool sport if I do say so myself. But I got to a point with dance even where I didn't really want to compete. I just liked doing it. I liked my friends. It was fun. I liked the music. I mean, I don't know what that says about me, but a lot of bagpipes. But I just wasn't really trying to compete. And then at the studio actually said to my mom, she can't dance here if she doesn't compete. This is a competitive studio, and you have to compete. So I did, and did pretty well. I got to a nice level there, but it was never like my dream to pursue things in Ireland or go really anywhere with it. So not very competitive, but very money driven. I was very offended when a large institution that encourages the sale of cookies through young adults did not cut me a check for a commission. And
Yeah.
and my mom had to explain to me that that's not really how that works. And I was gobsmacked by that. I could not believe the dedication I gave to that project. And it yielded to me a badge to put on clothes. And that for me was unacceptable. So very, very money driven. And that's when I actually learned to understand the parameters of a contract.
Yeah. So they kept the money, they gave you a badge, and that was, you learned very early on. That didn't motivate you.
No, I did not elect to do another year. And once again, my parents are like, really, there's more to this. I couldn't see it. All I could see was how robbed I was. So that, not very competitive, very money driven, and love helping people. Really, truly, just there is definitely a lot of that within my belief system as well. But the money within my family script has definitely influenced where I wanted to go in terms of next jumps in my career and how could I get there. And even when I was doing really, really fun and exciting jobs, I wasn't filling maybe perhaps the economy bucket of my life. And I had to make choices, what's important to me. Is it having the fun job that, people are like, oh, wow, married to something cool? Or is it being able to support myself and do fun things with my friends? And ultimately, I decided to go that way. So the way my belief system influenced what I ended up doing as a career. And now with, more reach and in a sales role, that's where I feel good. I like being able to help people, and I like those targets.
How about negative belief systems? Did you have, or do you have one that is a struggle? I mean, sometimes we have a belief system, we go, hey, this is kind of holding me back, or this somehow I butt heads with myself on. Is there anything that you can think of there?
Yeah, I think maybe the most relatable one that I can certainly tap into is, am I good enough? Do I deserve to be here? Have I done the right things to be here, or is this a fluke? And did I just apply on the right day that starts with T? And that one can come up a little every once in a while. What I've learned through a lot of sales trainings and leadership trainings is that, yes, I do belong here. I absolutely have earned a seat and a right to, speak my thoughts and opinions and be confident in those. But it's a little green monster that can kind of creep up sometimes and just sort of give you a bugaboo of whoa, I'm being asked to do something that maybe is out of my comfort zone. Am I the right person for that? Why are they thinking of me in that way? And it can definitely challenge maybe how good of a result I could have had that thought never happened at all.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I think we can circle around some of the ones that there were two. I had 2 or 3 bad belief systems that when I hired a sales coach who started kind of asking me, why did I do the things that I did? There were 2 that really were holding me back. One was just my money concept in general. And, when I got out of college, my first year out of college, I had a sales job and I had a $24,000 base salary, which was $2,000 a month. And then in commission that year, I earned, I think, another $14,000 in commission. So I made 38 for the year. And that was 2,000. That was first year kind of big boy job. 38 wasn't bad, kind of on par with my peers. My next year, I made 58. The company I was with cut my salary from 24,000 down to 12, but they raised my commission percentage and I sold more and I got my feet under me. So I went from 38 to 58. And then the next year I made 72. I was roughly 25 years old, 2002, making 75,000 a year. Pretty good, not bad. And then I just plateaued there for the next 5 years. And, looking back on that, it was kind of interesting. My dad, completely different career path. I mentioned he's got a PhD, but probably ballpark making about 75,000 a year. And I lived in the same house built by the same builder that built my dad's house. And my dad drove a Chevrolet, so I drove a Chevrolet. So there's things like that where you go, okay, well, that's, but that was kind of my comfort zone. So my belief system was, hey, 75,000 is pretty good. That's not a bad place to be. And so that part of one of the things I had to unlearn was I had to kind of rewire my brain to go, hey, that's not good enough. Having more kids solved that problem for me. But the other thing is, I remember my first year in sales, or maybe it was kind of the beginning of my second year in sales. So I had made $38,000 that first year. And I remember giving a proposal to a homeowner for $38,000. And I remember looking at that thinking, I worked all of last year to make that amount of money. And so, the way I presented that proposal, knees shaking, palms sweating, vomit on my sweater, mom's spaghetti, like to quote Eminem, like I was having a little panic attack, But that's money weakness. That's just your money concept isn't strong, or it's not strong enough to support what I was selling at the time. And so I had to beef up my money belief system there. That was one. The other one that really held me back was, again, growing up with not a lot of money. Every purchase was a big decision. And so, you got to think about it. Is this something you really want? Is this the right amount of money? And I remember hiring my Sandler sales coach, and he said, hey, tell me about a purchase that you made recently. And I had just bought a TV. And he was like, how long did it take you to make that purchase? I was like, 3 or 4 months. He's like, 3 or 4 months? Like, how expensive was the TV? And I don't know, it was like $900 or something, right? He's like, what were you debating? And I was like, well, like the 55 inch was like $800 and the 60 inch was like $900. I was trying to decide, should I spend the extra $100? He's like, it took you 4 months to decide, is it worth spending an extra $100? And I was like, yeah, pretty much. Right. And that's just, again, my upbringing. We don't have a lot of extra money. You got to save wherever you can save. There's no need to spend and waste money. The problem with that is that when a customer says to me, hey, Stephen, we're going to think it over, my brain goes, yeah, I'd think it over too, especially if it's a big purchase, right? I mean, if it's a $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 heating and air system, and they're like, hey, we'll think about it, get back to you. I go, my God, I'd think about that for like 6 months, right? Yeah. And so that's a belief system that I had to unlearn in order to be a better salesperson. So.
That is so valuable to be able to really do that introspective look at why your buying habits or the way you approach things is hindering you maybe in career, right? I know we challenge dealerships to do that when we talk about financing, right? Maybe you have a core belief that financing's not for you, right? But that doesn't mean that your customer couldn't use financing to help them along with that kind of system, right? So very, very similar. I kind of like that we're sharing some personal stories here because it helps kind of tell the story of how we go about thinking these things. But as you were talking, I was kind of thinking about too one belief that it kind of stems from, do I belong here? But the first job that I had out of college, it was a minimum wage job, which for, a young graduate with a degree is not all that impressive. But it was with a sports team that had a big name in the area. And one of the pieces of advice my dad actually had given me at the time was, you know what, take the job because that job will probably get you every job you have after that. And if he wasn't right, I mean, it has turned into a talking point on my resume that shines. And it was an incredible experience. besides all the other amazing skills I got out of it, it's a big name, and that was fun to have. But what I noticed out of that cohort was, some of the people that got promoted along a little further than I did, I was just noticing sort of like the nepotism around me, right? Maybe their parents had a connection or they had season tickets. Well, my parents live in a market that's 600 miles away. They're not buying season tickets to this group. And, maybe similar to you, my parents really aren't, buying season tickets to anything because they've got another kid in college and they've got other goals that they've got. So that wasn't going to be our story. And so then that would feed this, well, am I ever going to get ahead? Because I don't have the right, lot cast in front of me to get to the next level. And what that does to you going to work every single day, it's not a good thing. It doesn't really propel you for the next level. And what it did for me was it kind of turned me into a little bit of a job jumper. And on the one hand, you do that too much and you don't have the history building up on your resume. It can be kind of a hindrance in some people's eyes. But what it did allow me to do very quickly at a young age is also negotiate my worth very quickly. And every time I job jumped, the only time I ever went for a pay cut was to get health insurance. Because at that point I had I had aged out of health insurance with my parents, and that all of a sudden became a very big value to me. Very, very like overnight, I was like, oh wow, this is all of a sudden a big deal and something that I hadn't been taking into consideration. So, yeah, it was kind of interesting that was how my resume ended up getting the notches on it, was, like this bad belief system. But now that I've done a little bit of that introspective work, I've been able to find a company where I have my footing and I feel like I can be my authentic self every day. And you know what? It doesn't matter that like my parents' names aren't on the buildings. I'm here because of my name. Like I've learned to appreciate that more fully, as I've matured a little bit.
Yeah. So here's a question. So you had two belief systems, or you've talked about two different ones that maybe conflict a little bit. One is you had to learn your worth and you had to negotiate for your worth because you are money motivated. But then the other thing you said is, hey, every now and then it's like, hey, am I good enough to be here? Am I in the right seat? Did I just get lucky to get here? How do those two things reconcile with each other, or how do you navigate that?
Well, how much time do we have now?
Well, I think that's true of all of us, right? I think every single person, on one hand, like we're proud of ourselves. We feel like, hey, I'm worth the money. Somebody should invest in me. I'm worth it. On the other hand, we know we're not perfect. We see our own flaws better than anybody else sees our flaws. And so that is the struggle that I think almost every human being on the planet has. So you articulated it very well, but it applies to everybody.
Yeah, it does. And I think what's unique about the environment that I'm in right now is that I'm working with a company culture that really values development and invests time to learn about who I am as a person and what's going to help Mary do well. And anytime, you can get that alignment with career and personal, I mean, all of the lessons that you'll learn in any kind of development really can go to both buckets. It makes me a better spouse. It makes me, a better family member. And it makes me, hopefully, if my boss is listening out there, a really good employee, And that's a really key element to this is I didn't just all of a sudden change my belief system and find a career path that was wonderful. And, now I'm on rainbows and hitting targets and everything's great. It really took the hunt to find a good fit for me that was mutual. And we both benefit from it, right? Trane gets to benefit from me and I get to benefit from them. And we love that kind of a relationship. So I really think the hunting piece of finding that fit is important. And actually, it's interesting to hear you talk about a sales coach because I hired a career coach. And it was one of the best investments that I ever had. I was in a rut. I was in a manufacturing job that, unfortunately, during the pandemic, made it so that you couldn't see customers. And at the time, the product that I was selling, that was, it was a part within a part. So that was going to make selling really tough because conceptually it was just a little bit more challenging to explain. This is also kind of like before the advent of Teams and whatnot. So I think honestly nowadays would be a little bit more improved, but I was in a rut. I was not hitting my numbers, which made my money situation not my favorite. And I needed some inspiration, and I ultimately got it through this career coach who she really challenged me to think about my next. And she kind of left that question very vague and very open. It didn't necessarily even have to be my next career, but what do I want my life to look like? What do I want my days to look like? How do I want to show up for my partner? Like, what's that going to be? And then I found the company that made sense for me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when I coach salespeople, I mean, now, I had a coach, now I am the coach. And so I'm wearing the other hat. And it's, the challenge, again, somewhat universal, is everybody's performance is based on their view of themselves. And so what they come for specifically with sales coaching is they want to improve their performance. And so the challenge, though, is, well, if your performance is just a reflection of your view of yourself, how do we raise your view of yourself so that your performance goes up? Because that's ultimately the crux of the issue. And so techniques part of that. I mean, closing techniques and prospecting techniques and so on. But it's really the confidence that comes from those techniques. If you can execute the technique well and you've got a high degree of confidence, your belief in yourself goes up. That's where you see the results go. And so it's a challenge. It's a challenge for everybody. My coach, on top of maybe these childhood belief systems or childhood worldviews that we kind of bring with us, then you have like what you've learned as an adult. And I would say one of the other challenges that I found affected my sales career was a few years ago. I had every year for probably 10 or 11 years in a row, my income went up. And then a few years ago, I had a pretty good drop, and it had nothing to do with, did I forget how to sell? Did I forget how to prospect? Did I forget a closing technique? What happened was I got divorced. And so your self-esteem to some extent is going to take a hit no matter what. It's going to, you didn't get married to get divorced. So at some point in time, you thought, hey, this is going to last forever. And then it doesn't. So there's maybe a sense of failure that comes in. And so it's completely an emotional response, but your belief system takes that hit. And so then your performance takes a hit. So it's not just, your childhood affecting your sales results. It's your adulthood and the circumstances around you. And I see that all day, every day with salespeople who are struggling with divorce, death in the family, illness, chronic illness, could be theirs, could be their child's, could be their parents. And sometimes the mental drain that comes from that. And so this idea of, okay, well, how do you worry about your quarterly numbers when you've got this major life crisis going on? That's another skill set that I had to learn, was to say, okay, well, but I can't just stop making money just to deal with this crisis. So both of these things have to continue to move on. So that's a trick too.
That's a tough one. And I'll throw one in there that you might not think of as a crisis. But I got married last year, and I've got an amazing mom. So if my mom ever hears this, because she's awesome and supportive, Mom, I love you so much. But I have a mom with expectations of what that event should look like. And how do I manage, a very full plate with, pretty aggressive strategies going on, and plan, a beautiful event, to satisfy, roughly, I think we ended up, like 120 family members, like, woo, not a crisis in the sense of a negative connotation, but certainly a hot button that did not evade me for a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, but on that note too of what you were saying, I mean, I've definitely had personal demons, if you will, pop up, during my adulthood, and all of a sudden, one day you're living with somebody and the next day you're not, and what does that look like? And I still got to be a good human and show up for work. And one of the things that I've really owned in my adulthood, And I really recommend, I think if everyone could just do it and keep sharpening that edge, we'd all be better off as a society. But just be honest around the people around you about what's going on. And I'm really lucky when I was going through a bit of a relationship change. I had some amazing coworkers that I really could just say, I'm not myself today, and I don't need to give you the nitty gritty, but this is what's going on at a high level. You take that where you want to. But just being honest and just saying, I'm not myself today, and I really could use some coverage and some help. You'd be amazed what people are really willing to give when they know what's going on. It's when we're cryptic and smoke and mirrors and I can't talk about it and people start to say like, well, you're just lazy, like, come on, let's get motivated, let's go. And I think talking about sort of what's happening can help get through that a little bit, with ease. It's not easy, but it can help lessen maybe the severity.
Yeah, I ended up hiring a performance psychologist, which is essentially a sports psychologist, and almost all of his clients are actually athletes. And it's interesting because he's not coaching them on the physical aspect of their sport. He's coaching them on the mental toughness aspect of their sport. And I decided that's what I needed to get out of my rut. So I hired a sports psychologist to get back in the game for sales. And it was enormously helpful for me. And I don't know that I learned anything new. A lot of the concepts that he taught me, I probably knew. But I think like a lot of times in life, it just comes down to execution. And so having somebody say, hey, here's what we're going to do. Let's execute on this. And that helps provide a little external motivation to get things done and get some momentum going. That was enormously helpful. I think my takeaway from all of that, there were one takeaway, which is maybe obvious. And then the other takeaway is not so obvious, but, we talk a lot about goal setting in corporate America. And, I now I think of goal setting as a little differently. And so where I used to say, hey, my goal is to sell $150,000 worth of heating and air this month. That's not a goal anymore. And the way I've separated that mentally is I say, well, goals are for my personal life. The plan, how I'm going to get there, that's my work life. So if I want to go on a vacation, if I want to pay off a credit card, if I want to buy a car, if I've got something over here, that's the goal. How am I going to go on that vacation? Well, the way I'm going to achieve that is I'm going to sell $150,000 of air conditioning. That's the plan. Oh, and so that was very helpful for me to separate out terminology. Goals go with your personal life. Work life is just the plan on how to get what you want out of your personal life.
And that is exactly what my career coach was doing for me. She was saying, what kind of life do you want to have? Okay, now what job fits that lifestyle? And all of a sudden I was like, oh, it's not about just going to find remote working jobs. It's about finding a job that lets me live in this area and have these experiences, because that's the kind of life I want to have. So it's amazing. Like sports psychology, career coaching. Amazing. Yeah.
A lot of overlap. I think it's interesting too, when I talk to salespeople, they'll say things like, well, I want work-life balance. And my question to them is, well, if you suck at work and you suck at home, is that balanced? I mean, is that work-life balance? Is that what you want? Because I think what we really want, when we say we want work-life balance, what we mean is, I don't want to be a workaholic. I still want to see my family. Yeah. But the downside of that is those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can be excellent at work and have a great life. Those two things they're not mutually exclusive. So that for me was a good concept to go, okay, work-life balance doesn't mean I'm going to suck at work so that I can be good at home, because those two things don't happen. If you suck at work, you're probably going to suck at home. You're not going to be able to pay your bills. You're going to be cranky. You're tired. Your kids are going to be like, Dad, what's up? But if you're great at work, you can be great at home. I mean, that helped me enormously. Then the other concept that I think really helped was, okay, so if my belief in myself, for instance, I made $75,000 a year for about 5 or 6 years in a row. And so when I go see my sales coach, he says, what do you want to do? Why are you coming to get some coaching? And I said, well, I need to make at least $100,000. And so he says, are you worth $100,000? And I say, yes. I say, yes. He says, you don't believe that. And I was a little offended. I'm like, what do you mean I don't believe that? Because, well, look, I mean, if you felt you were worth 100 grand a year and you were only making 75 grand a year for 5 years in a row, you would have done something different. Either you would have figured out how to make 100 grand a year in your current role, or you would have gone and gotten another role. So the problem isn't that you're making 75 and you need to make 100. The problem is you're making 75 and that's all you really think you're worth, because if you thought you were worth more, you would have done more. You would have done something. So we're going to have to change that belief system in order for you to make 100 grand a year. You got to believe you're worth it. Well, what's worth it? So goal setting for me, again, the plan is what you do at work. Goals are what you do at home. But goal setting was then, okay, if you set a goal and you hit a goal, your belief in yourself goes up a little bit. And so if you just kind of repeat that over time, and maybe you start with small goals, but you set small goals, you hit it, then you build up. Over time, your belief in yourself raises, and then you're able to raise your performance at work. And that was a really good concept. And I really like that. The flip side of that was maybe what surprised me, which is if you say you're going to do something and then you don't do it, right? You set a goal and you don't do it, or even just you tell your friend, hey, I'll call you Friday, and you don't call on Friday. When you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, one ramification is other people don't believe you. The bigger drawback is you don't believe you. Your belief in yourself takes the hit. So goal setting in that sense is really dangerous, because once you say you're going to do something, your belief in yourself is either going up or down, but it's not going to stay neutral. And so you got to be very careful with your goal setting. Don't say you're going to do something and then not do it, because now you're in your head. You're like, oh yeah, when I say I'm going to do something, sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. And that is not the top performance mentality. So that was a real interesting piece for me to learn, was goal setting is dangerous. It's not something just to be done willy-nilly. Don't, sometimes you hear some people say, well, I set these really high goals, and then if I don't hit them, like at least I came close, or, you aim for the stars, and if you miss, you're still in the sky or something. And my performance psychologist would say, no. Like, hey, if you say you're going to do it, you got to do it. And so don't set a goal and not do it.
I think you're looking for shoot for the moon. If you miss, you land on the stars.
Yeah, some crap like that. That's what that is.
Yeah, no, but I think it's true, and it is dangerous. It's great power comes great responsibility, and with great goals come great expectations, right? And
oh yeah,
that is and expectations. What is it? Unspoken expectations can lead to very realized disappointments, right? And if you're putting that goal down there, but you've got that voice in your head saying like, I don't know if we're gonna do it, and I don't know if we're gonna get there. Like, is that really the goal, or is there something deeper in that maybe you got to do first, and then you get to that goal, or is it a role shift of where does that goal live? And I mean, that's so true, so relatable. And I think that's I think that's really like the maybe the enlightenment part of this. When you can do that, you really can find peace within. I feel good about this. This is who I am. This is why I make these decisions. And the more confidently I can speak about that, the more confident I am in myself, right? Because all of a sudden now, when someone asks me what I like about my job, I know exactly what I like about my job. I've wanted to be here because it affords me the ability to be a really good spouse and provide for my family, and also, have the flexibility to do the fun things that I like to do. Like that's what I wanted my life to be, and it's fun. Now, does that mean like it couldn't, evolve and grow? No, I think that's one thing that we always have to kind of consider too, is goals can change, dreams can change, and I might find another hobby that all of a sudden I'm like, wow, that's the goal, So it's okay to always be evolving and expanding on that, but just reframing maybe where that goal lives and what it's driving, motivating. It's really, really interesting. I love learning about people. I love forming genuine connections. And my biggest encouragement to anyone who's listening to this that's kind of thinking through maybe what their belief system is, start up a conversation with someone just like Stephen and I are doing, like to even just learn about your belief system and what's, where you came from, why you do what you do, and who you are, what you are. Like, that's what's so cool about this human experience, is that we can do that with one another. And if you're really sitting there thinking like, man, I wish I could do that too, you know, call somebody up and have a conversation and just say, hey, this might be feeling like it's coming out of left field, but I want to learn about you. And I think that can be a really powerful, way to enter into how do I look at my own belief system.
Yeah. Funny story for you, Mary. A few years ago, I was learning these concepts and managing a sales team. And so we start having some of these conversations in our sales meetings. And what I realized is, holy crap, are these guys messed up, myself included. And so I made the offer. I was like, hey, if you guys turn in therapy sessions on your expense report, I'll approve it. And about half the sales team took me up on it. So they would go to therapy, they would turn in their receipts. I would expense it out of my marketing budget. And our sales went up 30% that year. So there you go.
Wow.
Coincidence? I don't know.
Wow. And it's worth looking into with, folks who maybe carry like major medical insurance, right? That's
yeah.
But that's become like a new kind of a new check mark for some big major plans. It's like talk therapy and mental health and making sure that muscle's working too, right?
Absolutely.
That's awesome. I love that you did that for your group. I think that's amazing. I think it's just another kind of a very small drop in a big bucket of culture that's really important. And we certainly love to hear when people are taking care of people in that way.
I'm sure that somewhere there's an auditor going, I don't think this belongs in the marketing bucket, but you know what? It worked.
Fair enough. Hey, as long as you didn't do anything weird with taxes, I bet you're okay.
No, yeah. It's all good.
Oh, well, great. Well, always good to learn more about you, Stephen. I'm pumped that we can just kind of keep figuring out what it is that's going to keep us going and make us excited about what's coming next.
Heating and air is a great industry, and it's so interesting how all these little layers impact how successful you could be in it. So I appreciated the conversation.
You bet. All right. Well, until next time.
See you next time.
See you soon.